Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Hey there, welcome to another edition of the MemoPod. It is great to have all of you with us and I am thrilled about it. We are in the middle now, right in the meaty part of our membership drive, wanting people to join us, so we're making that 30% off for the annual purchase price of a subscription, a paid subscription, or 20% off for the monthly. Again, this is for new subscribers, so many of you have already locked in and your subscription is coming up for renewal and all of that. But man, if you are somebody who has been on the cusp, on the edge, thinking about maybe this would be a benefit for me. Maybe this would be, what's the word I'm looking for? It would be edifying. That's the word. I didn't think I was going to get it, but I got it. That would be edifying for me. Maybe that would be a good use of my money to set aside, $8 a month. This would be the time to give it a shot, because this is when you get that. It's not the $10, it's the $8 a month, or you can do the whole year for just $70, which is hopefully enticing enough, a good enough deal that you can feel good about that kind of investment. We'd love to have you part of this. And the reason is pretty simple, because the political world offers no hope. It doesn't. It doesn't mean that Christians don't engage there. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't vote in elections. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't make rational, discerning decisions about what policies we should support and what policies we promote and what policies we are non-negotiable on, and say this. I'm not gonna negotiate this point. I can on other things, but not this. Obviously, Christians have to be discerning in every area of life, and that includes politics. And no, you're not voting for a preacher. That doesn't mean that you can't have your moral standards and expectations for who it is that earns your vote. So those are the kind of conversations and things that we try to cut through, instead of the binary, well, you have to pick this one or you have to pick this one, and it needs to be this, and here's why it has to be this, and every Republican you should vote for, every Democrat you should vote against, or you shouldn't vote for any Republicans. I mean, there's so much of that nonsense and noise out there. One of the things that we try to do is to give politics its due, to understand that that is part of life, and Christians are to act faithfully in that realm, but it is one part of life. And it is not the part of life where Jesus said you're going to change the world. And that is something that I have had to learn over the course of many years, because politics has been my thing, man, for a long time. I just loved it. And I don't as much anymore, because I see it as hopeless. And I guess I shouldn't even say see it as hopeless. I recognize it as hopeless. That it is an enterprise that is built around compromise and pragmatism. It's built around majority rule. Well, what happens when the majority of people are godless? I mean, that's not going to end well for anybody. And so Christians are to be, from another time and another place, we're to be witnesses to a truth and a kingdom that is far better than anything man has to offer. And this has been something that, I've tried to process, and okay, so what is the appropriate amount of my time and energy that I put into politics, Jesus did not say that governments would be the way that we would change the world. And he did not say that that civic organizations would be the way that we change the world. He didn't say that schools were going to be the way that we were going to change the world. Now, obviously, I'm involved in civic organizations. Obviously, I write about and speak about government. Obviously, I've worked in a public school system for over 2 decades. So I believe that Christians have a responsibility in those areas, and I want to be faithful in those areas, a faithful witness, and giving testimony to his truth in those areas. I certainly want to do that, but I also know that my primary mission as a believer is to make disciples. And Jesus instituted one thing to make disciples, and that was the church. And so that's where my primary focus has to be. And it's where every believer's should be. And I'll tell you what you're going to find. When the church operates in a disciple-making realm, when we operate with the sole purpose of discipling people's hearts and minds to embrace godliness and to live as faithful Christians, all that other stuff, civic organizations are going to change, the schools are going to change, government's going to change, you're going to get different kinds of politicians on the ballot. I mean, that's one of the great frustrations of Christians today. Are these our choices? And we feel like we got to make one of the 2 choices, and some say no, we shouldn't make any of the choices. But if we want to change that reality, then we should be following Jesus's recommendation for how to do that. And I wonder if maybe we don't need a little bit better reminder of that. And that's what this subscription service, that's what this entire thing that we're doing here, the memo and all of it, has always been about. Proper, how did I phrase it a couple of weeks ago? The ordering of our loves to make sure that they are properly ordered. Okay. So with all of that as an intro, I would love it if you are a free subscriber, if you would give us a shot. And if you just want to try it a month-to-month basis, you just click on it and get it for $8 a month, $8. That's like a drink and a half at Starbucks. And it's per month. So to me, it's worth giving it a shot to see if it's of any value to you. And if it's not, then it's not. And you go and I'll be sad. But maybe it will be. Or you can just do the $70. You got this month to make it happen, and there's a link in the email that this came with. Okay, I have to start off with Matt Walsh. Now, Matt Walsh is somebody that when I was on the radio, this was at the beginning of the Matt Walsh thing, where he was just writing a blog and just kind of grew it from nothing. Remember, it was the Matt Walsh blog, and then Matt Walsh blog, and then that switched over and he became a writer for The Blaze. And then he gained enough notoriety there that he became a writer where he is now for the Daily Wire. And I don't know that he'll probably change from there. That's kind of the pinnacle, at least I think, in his world of where that would be. But Matt Walsh, one of the telltale attributes of Matt Walsh is that he is pretty blunt and straightforward. And some people will criticize him for that. Some people will applaud him for that. I'm just going to say I'm not responsible for what Matt Walsh does. I'm not. And when Matt Walsh does things that I think are deserving of attention and amplification, then I'll do it. And when I'm kind of like, I don't know about that, then I just don't bring it up. Matt Walsh is responsible for Matt Walsh. And I'm not. But when Matt Walsh nails it, I want to make sure that you hear it. And there is a progressive activist online, on social media. He goes by Lakota Man. Remember the Lakota Indians and all of that. And the Lakota Man decided to go after Matt Walsh in an exchange. And it all started when I think it was Jesse Kelly, who is another commentator, had posed the question as to why we are even allowing Indian reservations today. And I don't think I would word it that way. I would say, why are we subjecting ancestors or descendants of Native Americans, why are we subjecting them to life on a reservation? I've always used the Indian reservations as a prime example of why we don't want more government in our lives. That government isn't the great solution to the problem. Government is the problem. 99 times out of 100, that's the case. Now, are there cases where, building roads or at one point running the post office or raising an army and national defense, are there times where the government can do it right? Yep, absolutely. But the vast majority of the time, government intervenes and interferes in areas where it doesn't belong, and it makes things a lot worse. I don't think it intends to. I don't think the people involved in it, man. I don't think that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Barack Obama and the whole lot of them, I honestly don't believe that they have nefarious bad intentions. And I know some of you do. Some of you think that they're operating for some new world order and all of that stuff, and they don't love this country. I just think they have a different worldview. And they honestly think that they're going to do something good for society through their policies. I disagree with that, but I guess I'm not cynical enough to say that they're doing it on purpose to try to destroy the country. And again, I know some of you do. I don't want to get bogged down in all of that. But whenever people point to that big government should solve problems and we need more government to run this and more government to run that, a lot of people will say, well, look at the socialist countries. We don't want to go that route. You don't have to look at socialist countries. You want a prime example of what happens to people's lives when government comes in to take care of them, which is what government promises to do. Government promises to take care of your health care and give you a job and make sure you get an education and make sure you have enough food on the table and you got money and all of that stuff. That's precisely what they have guaranteed Native Americans on Indian reservations for a couple centuries now. And what have they done? Given billions of dollars to take care of the Indian population, they've created the most destitute, impoverished people on the planet. Or at least on our continent. I shouldn't say on the planet. On this continent. They're the most impoverished people that there are. And so Jesse Kelly was posing the question, why do we even allow it? I would say, why are we subjecting them to it? Why do we hate the Native Americans? Isn't what happened along the Trail of Tears and Wounded Knee and all of those horrible stories from American history, isn't that enough? Why are we continuing the punishment? I don't get it. So Matt Walsh responded to this and called the Indian reservation system a farce and says these were Stone Age societies, referring to the native populations that were conquered 150 years ago, time to move on. Okay, obviously a provocative statement, and maybe I'm not cynical enough, but I don't think Matt Walsh does this like he sits there and thinks, okay, what can I say that will generate the most clicks? What can I say that will generate the most controversy and therefore attention to me? I know there are people that think, excuse me, that's what he does. I don't think so. I just think that's his personality. I just think that's the way his mind works. It's an observation. To him, it is plain as the nose on the end of his face. And so he's just going to say it. Why are we trying to sustain and maintain a Stone Age civilization? There's no reason to. Well, that did not please progressive activist Lakota man, who responds to all of this and says, sorry, Matt, you didn't conquer a blanking thing. We he means natives. He put natives in parentheses, which again is funny. He's saying, Matt, you didn't conquer anything. I mean, you just live now. You didn't live back then and do any conquering. But wait a minute. This guy's getting ready to talk about his ancestors, and he's using the personal pronoun we. So Matt didn't do it, but he did. Nonetheless, we had no natural immunity to the disgusting diseases like smallpox that your dirty ancestors brought here from Europe. I mean, that's racism, is what that is. I know we don't call it that, but that's racism. You can't get around that. Imagine any other race, not talking about European white people. Imagine any other race saying that, calling them dirty people, your dirty ancestors brought here. Okay, How about this? Do you know where sexually transmitted diseases, venereal diseases, were introduced to Europe, for the most part? From native populations. Yeah, gonorrhea, syphilis, that stuff came from native populations and were introduced into Europe through those native populations. So, do I blame Lakota man for the prevalence of STDs and STIs in our culture? Or might that be kind of a stretch? Just saying. He goes on and says, we Lakota banned that puppy-killing colonizer Christy Nome from our land, and there's absolutely nothing you or any other white, trashy white man can do about it. I mean, again, just blatant racism. Well, Matt's not going to leave that alone. And Matt responds with this, and this is what I wanted to comment on myself. I am not suggesting Matt Walsh is not a Christian, okay? That's not what I'm doing at all. Okay, Matt Walsh can tell you what he is and what he believes. A Christian is somebody who professes faith and has the fruit of the Spirit. That's who a Christian is, who's been obedient to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if that's what Matt claims to be, I don't know any different. I'll read what he says. He says, your ancestors raped, enslaved, tortured, and pillaged each other as a matter of course, and then were conquered by a group of people far more advanced by every quantifiable metric. Your ancestors hadn't even invented a written language, let alone any conception of basic human rights. They were living about 5,000 years behind the rest of the world. And if they had not been vanquished, you wouldn't have the phone you're using to whine at me right now, or any of the other things that make your life comfortable and enjoyable. You would not want to live in a world where your ancestors won the war, despite what you claim now, while basking in the luxuries and the comforts given to you by people you despise. All right. So is that's exactly what you get with Matt Walsh, okay? Just so we're clear on that. Nobody should have expected anything different from Matt Walsh. And you can easily look at that and say, well, technically he's not really wrong. Now, if you want to say that that's not the most tactful, the most beneficial way to approach it, I know some people will say that. They'll say it's too caustic, it's too aggressive. That may be. But it's not wrong. This is the part where I think it's helpful for us as believers to know history, because these kinds of conversations come up from time to time, and it is a natural impulse of a Christian to care for those who have been mistreated. And certainly there were crimes that were committed by Europeans. There were crimes that were committed by the government of the United States, by Andrew Jackson, and on into American history against Native populations. There's no doubt about it. There was racism directed against Native Americans, just like this guy, the Lakota man, who has Native American blood in him, is racist towards white people. Racism has always been around. But the claim itself, it would be helpful for Christians to be aware of this. And what Matt Walsh is saying, if you were unaware, is not wrong. I'm going to read to you from some ancient historians of early Aztec and other civilizations here in North America. Tlaloc was an even less attractive figure. He had a particularly predilection for the sacrifice of children. Okay, this is a native civilization here before white Europeans came from Europe. Europeans would come from Europe. Well done there. The remains of more than 40 boys and girls were discovered at the excavation site of the Great Pyramid, most bearing the marks of severe and prolonged torture. Children. This was to be expected given that the Aztec pictorial codices that have come down to us invariably, that means always, show the children crying before being sacrificed. Okay, so I'm sitting here thinking as I'm reading this is appalling, this is terrible, this is awful. This civilization, thank God that they were wiped off the face of the earth if this is the kind of conduct that they were engaged in. There's nothing here to be proud of. As much as, maybe I shouldn't say it like that. There's nothing there to be proud of, that's certainly true. But does that mean that that civilization never did anything beneficial? No, I think that that would be a stretch. Just like it is easy to say it is shameful what the old Confederacy was doing. It's not to mean that the Confederacy and the Southern states never contributed anything positive, but it was a good thing that the Confederacy's ideology relative to the enslavement of humanity was wiped off the face of the earth. We shouldn't lament that that happened. That was a good thing that happened. I would say the exact same thing about these civilizations where this was acceptable. Child sacrifice. I would think if you're going to sacrifice children, children are naturally going to be crying about it because they know what's coming. But that's not the full story. You want to know the depths of depravity. And this is what Walsh is talking about. The priest of Tlaloc believed the tears of innocent children to be particularly pleasing to the gods, and they took great care to ensure that their little victims were crying before and throughout the ceremony, so that the smoke of the sacrificial fire that they're burning these kids up in, the smoke would carry the children's tears up to the god above at that moment of death. The ritual began, and this is pretty harsh. The ritual began with the bones of the children being broken, their hands or their feet burned, and carvings etched into their flesh. They were then paraded before the celebrants of the ritual while crying. Insufficient tears from the children were believed to result in insufficient rains for the crops that year, so no brutality was spared. And at the end of it all, the mutilated victims were burned alive. That's what was going on when Europeans showed up. Now, was every tribe engaging in that kind of conduct? No. One of the reasons that Cortez is able to defeat the Aztecs that had millions of warriors, one of the major reasons that that happened is because a lot of the other tribes that were being brutalized and having their children treated like this, they themselves joined with the Europeans to get rid of the Aztecs and to defeat the Aztecs, something they couldn't do on their own. It's just important to keep this in mind. We have this mentality in our culture that we have these pristine civilizations that pre-existed the coming of Europeans, and Europeans ruined everything. That's kind of become the zeitgeist. That's become the generalized philosophy, the spirit of the age. The Babylon Bee guys made a woke Jesus video, and I laughed as I watched it. It was funny, obviously. They're funny people. But one of the parts in there was a spoof off of the rich young man who comes and says, Master, I've kept all of the commands since I was a kid. What else do I need to do to become saved? And you remember in Scripture, Jesus says, go sell everything you got and give it to the poor, because Jesus knew the man's first love was money. Well, in the Babylon Bee one, the guy comes and says, what else do I have to do to be saved? And the woke Jesus looks at the guy and says, be less white, and then walks off. And the voiceover says the man went away sad because he was as white as you can be. The reason that's funny is because that is the spirit of the age. That is, in so many words, what we're saying, that with white skin should come white guilt, should come a recognition of white privilege, should come a recognition of the colonizing history and the patriarchal society and the mistreatment of minorities and ethnic groups that are less than, and all of that. Christians have to be better than that. We have to keep a cleaner eye than that, a sharper eye out for truth. And the truth is often shrouded these days, and a little looking. And I'll tell you, sometimes you are prodded towards truth from the unlikeliest of sources. the provocative keyboard of Matt Walsh. And I say that, and you're going to think that I'm going after Matt Walsh, and I'm really not. He speaks a lot of things that are spot on and true. My only issue, and you're probably picking up on it with Matt Walsh, is he has such a gift. And it's an obvious gift of communication. He is extraordinarily articulate. He has I think the ability that I am most amazed at. And at one point, I don't know, maybe I even envied it. I don't anymore, thankfully, because envy's sinful. But he has an ability to observe things and recognize and see things and point it out. And then you say, oh, yeah. And for instance, when we hear the type of argument that, these natives are mistreated and these native lands belong to us and all of that, there's a part of you that's like, oh, okay, yeah, I mean, they were kind of mistreated. But then you think, well, wait a minute, what were they doing? You say, well, it's not really right. I posed this on the first day of class to my history students that I get, just to get conversation going. Because a lot of them, we don't live in a wokeized community, a lot of them will take the position that, the Europeans weren't wrong for coming over and colonizing the New World. And so I will play devil's advocate, and I'd say, okay, well, let's say I go out and I plant my flag. I'm exploring fire escapes, and I plant my flag in your family's apartment. And I plant it there, and I claim it as my own. And then, unfortunately, your family came home, and I had to kill them because they were savages trying to take over what I had claimed. And I posed that scenario and ask kids, okay, how do you respond to that? Pick it apart. And there's an obvious way to pick a lot of that apart. But anyway, that right there, what I laid out, that is the kind of mentality that you see. So back to Matt Walsh, he has the ability to pick up on that and to just break it down and say, wait a minute, let's keep in mind that this land that you say belongs to the natives, they were killing each other for it to begin with. Who said it was ever theirs to begin with? So he does a great job with that. My only issue with Matt Walsh is the resounding gong thing. And I know I'm not perfect at this, and I try to figure out, where's the appropriate balance and all of that between sounding like a resounding gong and speaking truth in love. And that's where I would say it's a shame because Walsh is so gifted. I think sometimes people, no, I don't think sometimes. I know, because I know people like this, that if Matt Walsh says it, well, I'm just going to reject it out of hand. Is that their problem? Yes, it is. It's their decision. But I think that could be somewhat avoided if there was a greater effort made, maybe to take a few seconds before you type out the response. Maybe be a little bit more cautious. What the scriptures say. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Be more discerning and thoughtful in the way that it's approached. I can't fault his intellect, and I think he's spot on with a lot of stuff. But that's why I always preface my Matt Walsh remarks the way that I do. So, again, there was a time I thought I wanted to be just like him, and I don't, because I'm not him. And he's responsible for him, and I'm responsible for me, and I just do things a little differently. But he's got the bigger platform, so maybe. But I've got you. You're here. And if you're a paid subscriber, you're going to get more of this. I got so much that I want to get to. I have a video clip. And maybe this is going to take away everything I just said about having Christian character. But you are going to laugh at this video clip. You may even think, like I did, should I laugh at this? And then the more that I looked into it and realized what was going on, yeah. No, I definitely should laugh at this. This is one of those things it's okay to laugh at. I'm guaranteeing if you have not seen this video that came from one of those campus protests where the students were out there and they were all demanding essentially death to Israel, and they're not saying that, but they are saying that, Hamas sympathizing students. If you have not seen the video, the footage of the young woman who will not listen to authorities, and she's standing there with her bike and her mask, her COVID mask is on, and she's being told you need to move like everybody else is moving, and she doesn't do it. If you have not seen what happened, this is almost like it's out of a cartoon. It's one of the greatest things that I've seen this year. Maybe the best video clip I've seen this year. As soon as I realized it was okay to laugh, I really laughed. And I rewound it and watched it again. You're going to do the same thing, I'm telling you, if you're watching online. If you're listening, I'm just going to have to explain it to you. But anyway, that comes up in the second half of the podcast today. Joe Biden has come out with a plan that a lot of us as believers may think, well, that's a good thing. He's going to help people buy homes. I need to talk to you about how a Christian looks at this mortgage assistance plan, and that sounds boring. I'm not going to make it boring. You are inviting misery. Remember what we were just saying about how the government thinks it's got great ideas and great intentions, but it really screws things up? This is a nightmare that is waiting to happen. And Christians need to be sounding the alarm, not for the sake of political victory, but for the sake of helping people protect themselves. So I got that. We've got this whole issue with David French. I'm going to get to as much of it as I can in the second half. I know we're not going to have a ton of time because I went long this first half, but that video you've got to see. I want to talk about this Biden proposal and how we look at that through the eyes of faith. And also, if we get time, a little David French action. We'll just see what we can get to. If you're a free subscriber, I got to leave you here unless you just click that link and join us. Why not? I think you'd like it. And I know you'd love this video clip coming up. So think about it. Give us a shot for a month or two, or for the first year. Just do that first year for $70. Just rip it off like a Band-Aid, and then we're good. And you're gonna love it. All right. Rest of you paid subscribers, stay tuned. Free subscribers, I'll see you next week.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonigal's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.